see everybody here. Thank you all for coming. I can't tell you how thrilled I am to be part of this, but you know, I have just a few management people that I talked to all along. You guys make it real, and thank you for being here. So, I'm going to talk to you about the 43 nutrients that you've been hearing about so long. First, I'll tell you a little about my background, and then talk to you about the 43 nutrients, talk to you about trying to do it at home, and then a little bit about the science, so you'll understand that that's an important part of what I do, and certainly for the company. So, forget all the real stuff. Really, I'm a wife, and I'm a mother, and I'm actually a grandmother, and I'm a grandmother again, and I'm about to be a grandmother of twins again. So it's all very exciting. They just set things up last week, so I said they got to be a part of it. They're part of my family. But in the times when I wasn't doing all that kind of stuff, I was doing some other things. I got my doctorate in nutrition, and I was on the faculty at Harvard Medical School, where I did a lot of research. And some of you think of research as, well, they feed a few rats something with a vitamin and call it a day. I didn't do that stuff, and neither did my lab there. We were interested in real things of what happens to humans getting nutrients, and that was the whole bulk of my academic career. It resulted in publication of lots of papers, 100 plus. I spoke all over the place around the world on nutrition, not only to my peers, defending my science, but also to the public. And I wrote these papers in, trying to feed cancer patients and taking care of burned children, which is what I did, and also looking at the effect of fish oil on people with HIV infection. That was my doctoral dissertation. We wrote a lot of books in our lab together, too, to educate doctors and other nutritionists. I also had a business profession. I founded a company where we developed foods for people with chronic conditions like diabetes. And then I worked in the dietary supplement field for many years, developing products for dietary supplement companies, retail and multi-level ones, and developed Tony Robbins' whole line of products, Inner Balance. But I continued to publish. I was always curious about, are we doing the right thing with these supplements and foods? And I wrote papers about vitamin E and its benefit, and fish oil in pregnancy, how much should a pregnant woman take. I also, those of you that have worked in the supplement field probably recognize these books written by Phyllis Balch. The book on the right sold 8 million copies. There's a lot of people that know about nutrition. Sadly, she died several years ago, and I was contacted by the publisher to step in her shoes and update both volumes, which I did, and these are on the market. So I know a lot about food, and I know a lot about supplements, and want to use them correctly. So lastly, I had a few corporations that I worked with. Wild Oats was a grocery store, so I worked with them, and then I worked with the California Raisin Board, a milk protein company, a company that makes flours, wheats, and other grains. And I'm on the Sam's Club Advisory Board. They have a wonderful magazine, which I'm going to push here. It's free online, and I read every word, every issue, and the staff is doing a superb job. It's a great way to get educated. And then I do a little volunteer work. I lost so many friends now to cancer, and I have a physician friend in Florida, and he and I developed this Cancer Nutrition Consortium, and we design foods now for people getting chemo and radiation therapy, a group that I can tell you had been neglected for a long time. So, enough about me. Let me tell you about Chip and me. I've known Chip for 20 years. We started off sort of doing the same things in Boston and became very good friends. So in April, he calls me down, I meet him in New Jersey, and he says, I got this thing, and I want you to tell me what you think of it. So, you know, he goes through, you know, sort of what you all heard here, and I'm there, I don't know, you know, I think it's new. I don't know if it's real. Sounds okay, and I had David and Peter in the room, and they're staring at me saying, well, come on, tell me it's wonderful. And I'm there, I can't do that. So everything it just takes me a long time. So with my skepticism, I went through a series of thoughts in my mind and said, first thing I said, get over it, Chip. Just tell people to eat real foods. And it's the biggest irony was that when I arrived and I didn't know what Chip was going to tell me. He was talking about essential nutrients. A year before, I had written this book called Essential Foods. We had exactly the same theory, except in hindsight, I wasn't quite as smart as Chip. I did with my dietitian hat. I said, you jokers would just eat what I tell you. You'd have all your essential nutrients, and you'd live a long life. And that was the book I wrote, and lots of articles that I cited, and I was really full of myself thinking, well, this is the way to go. Well, maybe not. Then I said, well, Chippy, let's just make life easier for people. Take a vitamin pill. I've worked in the supplement industry. There's tons of options out there. Go and just take something and then stop torturing people. Well, it turns out in reviewing the supplement industry, and as you know, I've worked there a long time and I'm not bad-mouthing them, but there are publications that, first of all, it's not as physiologic because you're popping a pill and you're not eating anything. It has stomach and GI problems, which I heard every company I consulted for, people don't take them correctly. And some of the supplements don't have enough of something or too much of something, or they omit them altogether. We don't do that. And Chip said, for clearly, he was not going to do that. But it doesn't teach anybody how to eat. It's not pleasurable. You're popping a pill. You're not really covering a lot of ground. So then I said, well, all right, maybe I was wrong, and maybe we need something new. But then I said, who doesn't get enough? Maybe Chip's making up a problem that doesn't exist. Well, it turns out 30 to 50% or 60% of the population doesn't get enough of all the vitamins and all the minerals. That's a pretty big number. I'm warming up to Chip now by this point saying, hey, maybe he's right. Then I looked at these next two interesting studies written by a friend of mine, Joanna Dwyer, who said, hey, get over it. People eat food, they take supplements, and then they eat fortified foods, like the cornflakes that I have up there. People, that's the real life that they do. So she and her co-researchers said, all right, let's add it all up together. We'll get a much better impression of what people eat. So you can see on both the vitamins, and the vitamins are on top, minerals are on the bottom. Everybody should be at 100, all those nutrients. And even summing everything together, you don't get there. No one gets enough vitamins and minerals. These are adults. Kids are the same problem. And all these mothers think, I'm going to give little Billy a little vitamin. Well, it turns out the vitamin has, like, the pediatric ones that I see have 5 or 6 things in it. Kids need 43 just like everybody else. It's not, can't make it up. So sadly, the kids don't get it either. So I said, okay, I'm really warming up to Chip now, and I'm saying, all right, there's a problem here. But then I said, well, maybe it doesn't have any consequence. Maybe this is all malarkey. Maybe there aren't 43 nutrients. Maybe you don't need them every day. Well, it turns out from the literature, and these are, from scientists published, not me talking, that I've read. First one was from a pediatric gastroenterologist in Chicago who talks about this hidden hunger. And he sees patients and he says, it's not like you're going to have scurvy where you have sores in your mouth and such. These are small symptoms, but he says that if children don't get all the nutrients they need, they're not going to be growing to their full capacity, and even worse, they're going to have varying degrees of neurocognitive deficits. In English, they're not going to be as smart as they could be without these nutrients. Adults, we got other problems. You go through a long life, you don't get these nutrients, and look what happens. You get age, acceleration, and coupled with that, you're getting old, and you're getting a lot of chronic conditions along with it. Increased risk of cancer, heart disease, and diabetes, which we got plenty of in our society. It can all be traced back to the lack of essential nutrients. So I'm really warming up to Chip at this point. I say, God, people can live longer, kids can be smarter, everybody can be happier and healthy. What's out there in the literature? Well, I have a couple of quotes that really stuck with me. And again, this isn't me making up anything. This is what learned scientists in the field say. First of all, they say, get over it. You can, tell people to eat a healthy diet. It is not happening. It's not going to happen. And you've got to do something else. And people will not get all their essential nutrients unless you fortify the food. And that's the genius of what Chip figured out ahead of all this stuff in the literature. Third thing was, talking to my peers, health professionals, get over it. You try to tell people to eat well, they're not eating well. Stop it. You have to think about other ways of feeding people with chronic conditions, or just keeping those that you still have are healthy, keeping them healthy. And the last one was my favorite, where one of the authors said, hey, but it's impossible. There's no way you can make a food that tastes good with all the essential nutrients in it. They hadn't heard of us, whoever we're going to be. Stay tuned, and we will let them know. So the other thing that I was taken with, once I swallowed my pride and said, yep, Chip got it right, I got it wrong, is that it's not making foods just with essential nutrients. We have a delivery system for other foods, carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. And one of my things that I've written on a lot is protein quality. And it's just a joy for me to go in a supermarket and look for some organic raw nonsense and look at the proteins and see that they're of such poor quality. It really is a shame that anybody's buying them and anyone's eating them. Proteins are very elegant, and we're designed in our DNA to only look for certain types of protein. And Chip and I have worked tirelessly to make sure that you're only getting the Cadillac of protein. So you may see our mix and you may say, boy, that's peculiar. What were they thinking? We were thinking of getting the best in there and making life easy. There's an international standard to grade proteins. It goes from 0 to 100. So we drove a stake in it. High quality ones are over 90, and that's where all our foods will be. We also have high density, so every bite you take, you're obviously going to get nutrients. You're going to have lots of water. It's a big thing that you heard Chip talking about. It makes you feel full. And you're lucky. You're first in. You're the only ones who are going to be able to be making all these statements about what you're selling. And it's really quite exciting. So, I'm a believer. I can't help it. It took me a journey. It took me several months of looking at the medical literature and reading things. And just a couple of things that really sealed the deal for me, if you will. This first thing is, I went back to my roots and thought about essential nutrients in my life. And I treated 10,000 patients easy for all sorts of diseases. And sadly never brought up essential nutrients, but perhaps should have. And when I went back to my favorite textbook, and it's like, I don't know, it's been on my shelf forever, Modern Nutrition, Health and Disease, I opened the thing, and the very first chapter is called Essential Nutrients, and I'm there. Oh, silly me, I should have started there in the beginning and not going through this journey of looking at things. So essential nutrients are absolutely real, and without them you die, and if you have them in low amounts, you won't grow well as a child, and you'll age faster, and all this stuff that I told you before. It's all real when it's in my favorite textbook on nutrition. The other thing is, the government has a series of books, which are all in my office. There's about 12 of them. And each nutrient is bound together. And what the Institute of Medicine did, they assembled these panels of learned scholars. So if you're a chromium expert, you're locked in the room for 4 days, presenting your work, comparing it to others. And each chapter goes through sort of what the nutrient does, and then talks about how much you need and how much you should take every day. And what we're doing is basing our stuff on the best science available. All his 43 are in these books, and again, another sanctioning point to say, we're not out in the weeds, you never have to squirm to talk about what you're talking about. We're doing it by the rules and following the real deal. And the last point, though, that is personal to me, I spent a professional career mostly caring for patients that could not eat on their own volition. I was sort of the queen they brought in at the end and said, grandma's going to have to be fed artificially. And sometimes we put a feeding tube in grandma's abdomen, and sometimes we put a catheter in the neck of patients. And my role with my team was to create every single essential nutrient so that patient would get out of the hospital, convalesce, and go home. And that was my specialty. I wrote about it, 50 papers on this stuff. And what's interesting now, I've sort of gone full circle in my life, coming back with Chip now and the team. I know that he's got every essential nutrient for all of your customers, because I've done it firsthand where I had to take every single nutrient, just like Chip did, put it in an intravenous solution, or put it in a tube feeding formula. So, I'm a believer.